It's everywhere in the vacuum of space. We call it vacuum, but it's really not. Most of our physics is really due to how this energy behaves. Our current model in the West has been try to ignore it. Don't look at the vacuum because there's so much energy there, it's scary. So if you have to look at it, just say everything's random. It's just the particles going all different directions. It's all random, like in the left-hand picture here. But you can have organization in that vacuum energy. You have various shapes of motions, vortexes, etc. Electromagnetism is the simplest example, but you can have other stuff that we haven't even thought about. And when these more complex patterns of energy appear, that's when torsion becomes important. So that's one more way of looking at it. And there was an experiment to show that that's not just fantasy, it's probably the secret to what makes prana, because prana are an example of one of these little collective motions of the vacuum energy. And this is an experiment done by Gurayev and Poponin. I'm mispronouncing the names, Irina, I'm sorry. But it was done basically with a vacuum chamber. So we're going to have a vacuum. We put a little container in there of DNA, airtight, very clean. Just have it in there, shine laser light on it, and then take out the container. So you should have just pure vacuum. And what they found is that the vacuum had been altered by having the DNA with the laser light shining on it. Now there was something about this vacuum that was not the way it was before. Shine the laser light in now, and you get little oscillations. You get evidence there's some kind of invisible, massless particles of something, not physical, that are now there. This, we believe, is prana. This is an example of how they took the vacuum, put something into it, an energy pattern, into the vacuum energy that wasn't there before. So it's another way of looking at torsion. One more way is to say that the two-handedness is a right-handed torsion and a left-handed torsion. Right-handed torsion acts as though it's coming from the past into the future, kind of pushes things forward in time. The left-handed torsion kind of pushes things from the future back in time to the past. So our average time, the way time flows by our watch, is the result of this competition between these two flows, a forward flow and a backward flow. And our whole physics is built on the assumption that we can't change that very much. What the Russians are finding is that by understanding torsion, they can change the ratio of forward to backward torsion and speed up or slow down time. And that changes everything in physics. And this is, of course, the yin and the yang. This is the yang is forward in time, the yin backward in time. So it's a familiar concept in subtle energy. This is an experiment that Kozyrev did pretty early on to verify that he wasn't just nuts, he wasn't just fantasizing all this stuff. He took, what he found was to make torsion, you want a process that's irreversible. You want something that can't go backwards in time, and that tends to be a good way of making torsion. So he took a little cotton ball and put acetone on it, for example, or liquid nitrogen, let it evaporate. That's an irreversible process. It's going to go off the cotton swab, not back onto it. You hold that and near other sensitive processes, and he could measure what was happening. He had, on the left-hand side here, he has a glass container. Am I going in and out, by the way, or can you hear me pretty well in the back reliably, or so-so? Is that a yes or a? Oh, thank you, okay. Just make sure I'm not just talking to myself. Okay. So you have a glass container, and you suspend a thread from the top of it down, and then at the bottom of the thread you have a bar, and then two weights on the bar, a short arm with a heavy weight, a long arm with a light weight. There's a little, it's called a torsion pendulum. It can twist very easily this way. Very carefully balanced. They put shielding, Faraday cage around the outside to protect, electromagnetic noise. And then he puts the cotton swab on the outside of the glass near where the little mass is on the long arm of the pendulum. And depending on the type of process, the arm goes either away or toward the cotton swab. Now this is very, very carefully insulated, carefully controlled, so temperature is not playing a part here. There's force caused by the evaporation of the acetone, even through the glass, through the shielding, everything else. It's the force from increasing entropy. Entropy, which is a measure of randomness, is increasing when the acetone evaporates. When that happens, it causes a force that pushes the little mass away from it. It's like anti-gravity. It's very weak, but it's very real, very genuine. Another kind of process he will do with a different type of process that has positive, the reverse sign of entropy. In other words, this was entropy increasing. Now a different process would be entropy decreasing. Put a process like that outside, and now there's actually an attraction. Now the little mass is pulled toward the object. He's making something that kind of acts like gravity. So what he found is that torsion actually does behave like gravity, but it has two signs. It has either anti-gravity or positive gravity. Another kind of torsion pendulum uses a little circular cardboard plate suspended by the string in the middle, so it can rotate. When he puts his process on top of that, the right-handed torsion source, like the acetone, causes rotation of the plate in the right-handed direction. The negative entropy process causes rotation in the opposite way. So he's able to directly measure torsion, and he found that it was definitely linked to the entropy changes of the process that was creating it. And so here's a summary of that. Right-handed spin, which we call S sub r, is caused when entropy increases locally. Repels mass, causes things twisting to the right. And left-handed does just the opposite. He also found this energy can be reflected. If you have his evaporation, his acetone evaporating, and you pass the energy through a mirror and reflect that energy onto another torsion pendulum, it'll rotate the opposite way from the way it would normally have rotated. So reflection reversed the sign of the torsion. The other is just a summary of what I just said by one of the leading torsion experts. One of the interesting things from the point of view of physics is this sounds a lot like what they call dark energy and dark matter, which are mysterious to astrophysicists in the West because they weren't supposed to be there. They were not predicted. They're not part of Einstein's equations. They can fudge them to added, but it's not supposed to be there. And so physicists had a field day inventing new kinds of particles that nobody could see that might cause an effect like this. And of course, a lot of people who had theories that were 20, 30 years old, predicting things that no one had ever been able to see, said, aha, that must be my particle. It must be showing up now in gravity. So it's been a kind of a wild ride with dark energy and dark matter. But it looks like it might just be the torsion in space that varies from place to place in space that might be the explanation for it. It would explain the data. So here's a quote from Dr. Yuri Kron, another Russian physicist who is in America now, who works in related areas and knows a lot about this stuff, and he also seconded the motion that this energy might be the source of dark matter and dark energy. In the Russian torsion circles, it's a pretty commonplace belief. So a lot of different things produce right-handed torsion. Here's just an example of 5 different things: acetone evaporating, a dying plant, melting ice, a chemical reaction, or sugar dissolving. Those are all cases where entropy is increasing locally and right-handed torsion is being produced. And contrarily, left-handed torsion is produced for a rubber band that's being stretched, a growing plant, ice freezing, or a compressed spring. These are examples where entropy locally is decreasing. And all this stuff has been verified experimentally now. It's not conjecture. Over 30 or 40 years of very careful experiments by not just Kozyrev, but Lavrentiev and a bunch of other Russian scientists. These things have been proven to happen. Torsion affects physical properties, thank goodness. So hopefully we'll be able to have some devices to measure these things. They have had devices now for 30 years to measure subtle energy. We are kind of strapped here in the West with a very limited set of choices. Here are some phenomena that do respond to subtle energy or torsion. Right-handed torsion repels the torsion arm. It causes the mercury volume to decrease. So if you have a mercury thermometer, you can actually see the effect. You have to insulate any temperature effects very carefully because these are all small effects. But if you do that, you can actually see it. It changes oscillator frequencies of quartz oscillators. Photocell output, water viscosity decreases, mass increases, spring stiffness, and liquid density increases. The left-handed torsion does just the opposite. So they have developed sensors to measure these things. And there's this energy all maps over into traditional Chinese medicine, as it should. The right and left-handed torsion is just the yang and the yin energies of Chinese medicine. It also, the left-handed, we believe, is the one that corresponds to Reich's orgone. Von Reichenbach, back in the 1850s in Germany, did 40 years of experiments with sensitives who could see this energy in the dark, and they called it negative and positive ode. That also maps over. So we have a lot of consistency here from different researchers using very different methods. The right side of the body tends to have right-handed torsion, left-handed torsion, obviously. The two forms of energy behave somewhat differently, just the same way that the right-handed torsion likes to repel a mass. It also tries to kind of get away from you. It tries to spread out. So one of von Reichenbach's experiments was with sensitives. He found that if you have a pendulum that's very carefully built, so it's rigidly mounted, you can't swing it with your muscles, he found that no one basically could make the pendulum swing. So it was not there was not any energetic effect to make the pendulum swing until one day he had one of his high sensitives put her finger on the top mount point of the pendulum. When that happened, the pendulum began swinging. Another high sensitive who was watching said there's a flow of bluish energy coming from her finger down the string, out the bottom of the pendulum. That's what's making it swing. So our right side tends to supply this bluish, active yang right-handed energy. And another test that von Reichenbach developed way back when was called his business card test. You take business cards, which I just happen to have a set I just printed up, and put them on your fingers like this. And if you're a high sensitive and allow the energy to flow up your hand and out the card will rotate. And I got this to work actually 2 times out of 3. I'm not a high sensitive, but he also tells you how to cheat. Because based on the mechanics of how subtle energy works, the body is polarized between left and right sides. And if you change the polarization of the left side, you'll also change the right side. So what he said was if you hold in the left hand the right kinds of material which have the same polarity as the right side, that would be what he called negative ode or right-handed torsion, and graphite, charcoal briquettes qualify. That's one of his materials that works. I had 5 charcoal briquettes in this hand. Oh, and take all the metal off your body. You can't have any metal on your body. That negates the effect. I mean, seriously, because metal has the opposite polarity. So you do that, I got it to rotate 2 times out of 3. So I quit at that point. But I had a witness one of the times. So the point is that this energy is real. It really can flow in certain circumstances, cause mechanical effects in some circumstances. There was this old practice of table tipping in the 1890s. People would get together at a seance, put their hands on the table, and begin meditating. And after a while, the table would begin to vibrate, maybe even move around the room some. And of course, nowadays it's fashionable to say that was just trickery, but it's not. There's a real energy. It's the same energy, same effect that was flowing from the hands into the table, out the bottom of the table legs into the floor, and that flow seems to result in a very weak but definite mechanical effect. When Qigong masters are pushing a distant object, and this is something that not all Qigong people apparently know about, but there are Qigong masters who can generate forces at a distance. And when you do, the pushing force is the right-handed spin, apparently, and the left-handed is the yin force. That's the pulling force. So there's a mapping between these different knowledge bases in different cultures about this energy. According to Kozyrev, if you're looking at there's a stationary torsion field when the object is rotating, and it depends on which way you're looking at it, how it appears to be spinning from your perspective. If it's going to the right, then from where you are, there's a right-handed torsion field at that side. If it appears to be rotating to the left from your perspective, you're in the left-handed torsion field, which is on the other side of the drawing there. And that's important because in some objects, like magnets, the electrons are all spinning in the same direction. They have their spins lined up. And so you can figure out from this rule what the subtle energy around a magnet ought to be. Here's a picture of a magnet on the top. All the little arrows indicate the direction of spin. They're all lined up going to the right. But because it's a negative charge, that causes a magnetic field in the opposite direction. So the north pole of the magnet's on the left-hand side. So that's where the right-handed spin is. So from this, you can figure out that the right-handed spin end of a magnet is the north pole of the magnet. And there is a whole school of magnetic healing. Davis and Rawls were some of the important founders who did a lot of experiments to show that magnets generate subtle energy around them, and you can have various effects of healing from that. One problem is that they reasoned, not being physicists, they figured, well, if the magnet is pointing to the north and opposites attract, then the end of the magnet pointing toward the north must be its south pole. And they got it backwards, because it turns out that at the north pole of the Earth, there is actually right now a magnetic south pole. So if you read Davis and Rawls or the other magnetic healers of that same school, you have to reverse polarity to be able to compare it to physicists like the Russians. That cost me 6 months to figure that one out. But it's very important to pull all this stuff together. So it's important to be able to translate from one language to another. And that's what I'm just saying that right there. But apart from that, there's really valuable work that they've done. So what Kozyrev found is you can reflect this energy. So you can make a parabolic mirror and have a source of torsion. Here it's a sealed flask at the left-hand side with something evaporating in it, and put it in a parabolic mirror a cavity and reflect and funnel all the energy to some other point, someplace else, in this case a mass on a balance or a sensitive balance, to weigh it, a scale. He did two different kinds of experiments here. One is just having the bare mass hanging and sending the torsion energy onto it. The other one is put it in a bath with water in a little beaker and shine the torsion energy into the water. And they have different effects because if you change the density of the water, it'll make the mass look like it's changing, but the water has actually a bigger effect. So you have two different kinds of experiments. In both types of experiments, they get measurable effects. Here is data where I think this is the case with the water anyway. You can see you have 4 different types of materials that are the target masses. And when they turn their irreversible process, their acetone evaporation, or whatever they're doing, at 60 minutes right in the middle, that little vertical line in the middle, then the masses change. The water density changes and the masses change. And in all these experiments, a lot of care was taken to get rid of temperature effects and all kinds of artifacts. So it's hard to just go into your basement and reproduce this stuff. I've tried, and there's a lot of care you have to take to do these experiments, but they are real effects. Here is some more data they have. So what they're really seeing is a change in the mass of the object. Now, Dr. Tiller in some of his experiments also sees changing mass. In his, in his special prepared space. And so a lot of these phenomena come up over and over again as you begin looking at subtle energy experiments. Radioactive decay rates, changes of mass, things like that. They also use the same phenomenon to do astronomy. You know, the sun gives off energy. They presume is probably giving off torsion as well. So here's a telescope where, yeah, please no pictures. Oh, is that just of me? Or, yeah, thanks, okay. They have a parabolic telescope, and the detector is a set of resistors. Resistors also respond to torsion. Tungsten apparently is the best. So you have a little bridge with 4 resistors, and that's at the focal point. One of them is at the focal point of the parabolic mirror. The sun is out here giving off the torsion waves. They do a very strange kind of astronomy, which I'm sure other astronomers found very peculiar, because they cover the front of their telescope with a big metal plate. So nothing can get in that is conventional. But they got good data. And here are 2 scans across the sky around the sun. And the middle line here, the big peak in the middle, is the instantaneous position of the sun from their point of view. In other words, it takes like 8.3 minutes or something to get from the sun to here. So what I call the apparent position is on the left-hand side here. That's where you see the sun in the sky. That's where you'd point if you're looking at where it appears to be. And they get a peak there too. But the stronger peak is the instantaneous peak. There was also a peak at a point where the sun will be 8.3 minutes after that, which is called the advanced position, which would be if the light is traveling backwards in time from the sun. In other words, like from us to the sun, that's the direction it would be to get there. So you actually get 3 images from the sun when you make a torsion measurement. So it's a very interesting type of energy. And of course, the middle one implies that it's traveling much faster than the speed of light. In fact, virtually instantaneous. You can also do astronomy of stars with this type of arrangement. Here are a couple of passes where they're letting the telescope go past several stars. And the little peaks that you're seeing are different stars. And what they also noticed when they did this, because the Earth is traveling around the sun, it's moving, normally there's an effect called aberration because of the relative velocities that cause the angles to change a little bit of the stars as we see them. But what they saw was the non-aberrated position, which would mean it implies that the signal is traveling much faster than the speed of light. So, interesting stuff. Here's another picture of the torsion generator. Devices like this have been built, patented, even commercialized to some extent, used for communication and other applications in Russia. A real simple torsion generator you can make by just 4 magnets with some graphite, some material, some ferrite, connecting it to make a little ring. So the magnetic field is in the axial direction around the ring. If you spin it real fast, what's happening is all the electrons in that ring their spins keep changing as the thing rotates. Therefore, it's going to make torsion. So you have a very cheap little commercial torsion generator. This is called the Comfort M. I think Alexander Spielman makes this. I'm sorry? I thought I heard a voice. Experiments have been done with devices like this. What they found is if you take some particular material like alcohol and you pass a torsion wave through it, it'll pick up information. It'll pick up some of the spin characteristics in the alcohol and carry that into something else. So you can actually transfer characteristics from alcohol into something else, in this case water. So you have a little plate of alcohol, plate of water, torsion waves going through them. And what they find is after a while, the water begins to taste a little bit like the alcohol, and it even has some inebriation properties like the alcohol, but the good thing is there's no hangover. So in a way it resembles the synthahol from Star Trek. And this is a whole new science where the spins seem to carry a lot of information about the nature of the material. So people are finding that they can duplicate certain properties of materials without that material itself. So you wouldn't have to have a toxic material. You could just capture the relevant information from the spins, transfer that into something else. That's one thing Dr. Yuri Krohn has been doing. It's also appears to be, from what I can tell, one of their secrets, that the Joey Jones experiments I mentioned earlier, where they're using pranic healers in a laboratory that's been specially cleansed of the etheric energy before going. How are we doing on time, by the way? Are we okay on time? 3 minutes? That's not okay on time. Okay, thank you. Okay. All right, I'm going to talk 10 times faster now. Let's see. Anyway, let's skip from that. They've done experiments to show that torsion can be used to cause swings of torsion pendulums, which verify. Tomsk University did a multi-year, 30 scientist effort to show that spinning gyroscopes, spinning very fast, produce torsion as they should, and you can measure, they'll bend laser light. The Earth rotates, of course, so there should be a torsion field around it. At the top of the Earth, the North Pole, there should be a left-handed field, it should be strong. This is one thing that Kozyrev said, that there's a connection between left-handed torsion and ESP, that it enhances ESP. Davis and Rawls found, take the South Pole of a magnet, put it on your third eye, that should be left-handed torsion, it'll increase ESP. And they claim that it did. If you go back to something I described in Synchronized Universe about this anomaly that at a certain time of day when the Virgo great attractor is overhead, ESP is 4 times better than any other time of day. And that's a mystery, supposedly. However, if it's true that left-handed torsion is responsible for what we call dark matter, stuff that has extra gravity, then left-handed torsion overhead should give you more ESP. So that would explain why this effect happens. Spins also precess. That's a very important aspect of their quality. This actually leads to why it is that pyramids have different types of energy below their apex versus above it. It's a left-handed field below it, which actually helps ESP also. They've developed devices that change the rate of time. You can speed up or slow down time in little chambers. Here is a diagram of a long-range communication through a city where normally the buildings and landscape would be an obstacle, but for torsion, it goes right through it. They've used it in metallurgy to change crystallization properties of materials. Here's cast copper. Apparently photographic emulsions also capture the torsion spin information. Take a picture with the photographic emulsion, you can process it and pull out